Yes.
Yeah, heavy breathing, please. Okay, maybe I'll start. So here we are on Tuesday. So we've been at this a few days now. And I feel like as I say, the retreat has started to bite a little bit. It started to sort of get in. And that always really surprises me, actually, because, you know, I'm at home. So I feel a sort of false sense of security that everything's just normal. It's all the same. It's all the same as it normally is. But actually, I'm doing more practice and more reflection and more opening up to awareness. So that does have an effect. It does have an effect. A good one, but sometimes a bumpy one, sometimes an opening to things that aren't so easy, and sometimes an opening to things that are lovely. Tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about the other part of the title of our retreat. So it's called Dukkha to Insight. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, well, maybe about conditions for insight. So I'm going to start off with a saying that I heard at Vajraloka first, but discovered as a sort of kind of well-known saying in the Buddhist world, and that is, insight is an accident. Practice just makes you more accident prone. Yeah. So insight is an accident. Spiritual practice just makes you more accident prone, which I thought was great when I heard it. That sense that we can't kind of will ourselves into insight. We can't make it happen with our will. And I thought also about some of the great artists that kind of talk about some of their most inspired breakthroughs being when an accident happens. Yeah. And I thought it is a little bit like when you get out the way somehow. You know, it's not entirely on purpose, but somehow you get out the way and something more slips through, as it were. So I guess that's kind of what I'm looking at is, if practice makes us more spiritual, sort of accident prone for insight, then it's about the conditions that we set up for that. So what conditions are good for creating insight accidents? That's what we're looking at. What conditions are helpful to, just for us to be able to sort of get out the way and something more to come through. And particularly in terms of what we're, where we're coming from on this retreat, sort of what we teach in the world, breathworks and MBCT, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. So this is a very sort of, it's quite a personal exploration of that, drawing a bit from my own experience and a bit from what I kind of observe on the courses that we run. And some of it, of course, I'm repeating from things other people have said. But this, I guess, is what has most been important for me in terms of insightful kind of conditions. And I thought I'd start when I'd been an order member for about 13 years, and I'd been teaching at the LBC for that long. I'd been a full-time teacher there, and then a MITRE convener, but still doing loads of teaching. And I started to feel that my practice was becoming a bit tight. It was starting to become a bit restrictive. I remember an order member coming and giving a talk at the LBC and saying that sometimes your practice is like a coat that you put on, and when you put it on, it's really lovely and beautiful and it fits perfectly. But then given time, it starts to feel a bit restrictive and a bit tight, and it's as if you've sort of outgrown it somehow, but you haven't quite got a new coat to put on in order to feel sort of freer and fuller. And I felt I was kind of yearning for a more authentic experience in my practice. I somehow felt that I had a tendency to try and fit my experience into ideas and ideals. So they were really great ideas and they were great ideals, but somehow I was trying to sort of shove my experience into them. And sometimes they just didn't fit. It was a little bit, like trying to get a square peg into a round hole, and however hard I'd bash at it, it wouldn't fit, and it was unpleasant. It was not effective and unpleasant. So basically what I did with that was just kind of gave everything up for a couple of years, left teaching at the LBC, left my chapter, left a very long-term relationship, threw everything up in the air, and it was a mess. It wasn't the freeing, authentic experience I'd hoped it would be. It was just the experience of all sorts of things that I'd held back and pushed back by trying to control my experience so much. Just woomph kind of came to the fore. So I had a couple of really quite difficult years, which I thought was going to be a lovely sort of poetic sabbatical, turned into a really bumpy ride. And so from then, I just kind of started to look for practice and ways of sort of building a practice that was going to be more authentic, that was really going to touch me, and that was really going to be more effective. And part of that was discovering mindfulness-based cognitive therapy and breathworks. And there were some of the things within that really helped me to develop a sort of stronger, realer practice. And there were three things in particular that I'm going to talk about, which at that point, which this was quite a long time ago, there wasn't so much of this in the movement. There was some, but there wasn't so much. I think now, actually, there's a lot more of what I'm going to talk about integrated into Triratna. There's some fantastic teachers, meditation teachers out there. But at the time, wasn't so abundant in that way. So I found with mindfulness, this approach to mindfulness, the sort of moment to moment approach to awareness, incredibly helpful in that sort of allowing experience to show itself. So by really kind of tracking, following experience just as it was. So I'm really sort of looking at this whole kind of emphasis on, or what we now call direct experience, which then I think we just called mindfulness. Sort of direct experience is a kind of sexier name for it, but you know, that kind of sense of just our experience as it is. And part of, I think, what was really helpful about this mindfulness approach was this sort of non-judgmental attitude to experience. It's quite a hot word, non-judgmental, in the Buddhist world, because does that mean it doesn't matter, or there's no ethical sense to it, or it's resignation or something like that? But really what I understood the non-judgmental element to be, or the accepting element, that's another kind of quite hot word, is that it's a non-reactive kind of response to experience, and a metaphor response to experience. So to be able to allow experience in and meet it with warmth, meet it with an open mind, rather than immediately you know, have a sort of hammer waiting with an idea of what experience should be and how it should look, to sort of whack it on the head with if it doesn't seem to fit the shape that you think it should be. So I found that really, really helpful. There seemed to be no discrepancy, in a sense, between sort of metta generally and mindfulness in that world. It was like mindfulness was shot through with kindness, and that just really seemed to make my experience more malleable, more workable with, the mind more workable with. And I'm just going to read you something which I thought was rather nice. It's simply being aware of what is going on as it is arising, attending deeply and directly with it, and relating to it with acceptance. A powerful act of participatory observation. And I really love that word, participatory observation. So that reminds me of what Bhante talked about when you're not alienated from your experience, you're in your experience, but with awareness. So you've got kind of both there, and that we need that. And this is actually something written by Becca Crane, who's the director of the Bangor Mindfulness Centre there. And yeah, I found that sort of attitude, that attending deeply and directly, I find it's a beautiful way of putting it, and with the participatory observation. And it's so much easier, I think, to really sort of then see the mind and the body for what it is, rather than constantly trying to impose what we think it should be onto it, which I think just makes experience recede. And then then we can't see it. Yeah, it kind of moves away from us, as it were. The mind is such a sensitive organ, I mean, incredibly. So I think we have to approach it with finesse and sensitivity for it to actually start to respond to us. And this direct experience is, you know, I see it very much as the first three in the four foundations of mindfulness, of seeing the body as the body, Vedana as Vedana, and thoughts as thoughts, or mental activity as mental activity. So we really just see it exactly for what it is, not what we think it should be. And then we can start to apply the pointers from the Dharma to investigate and explore that, because it's there revealed for us. Yeah, it's showing itself to us, as it were. So, you know, something like if impermanence, we don't have to keep sort of drilling away in our head that life is impermanent and constantly say to ourselves, it's impermanent, I must remember it's impermanent. Actually, all we've got to do is to really start to look at our own experience, and to look at it with that kind of clarity and interest, and really see what's going on. And then we start to see the impermanence of our experience. And when we see it in experience, then that affirms it more deeply for us than when it's just an idea that we keep kind of banging away at. And I think that just gave me much more access to the mind, and much more receptivity to my own experience, but then receptivity to whatever I brought to my experience, whether that be investigation or a mantra. You know, I'm much more I felt aware of what the actual effects of that were, what the true effects were. And yeah, as I say, that kind of made for more malleability. And yes, that sort of investigation, all those kind of pointers that are pointing us beyond our habitual mind, are pointing us to insight. And that is just about looking deeply into our experience as it is. I've got a little quote here from Bhante, which I think is rather nice, which I just found. And he's actually talking about different kinds of states of mind. And he says, so all that one really needs to do is just to look at one's own experience and ask oneself, what is happening? What is going on? What is the nature of my experience? You should be able to work it out for yourself, because everybody has feelings, everybody has emotions, everybody has experiences of volition. It shouldn't really be necessary to ask anybody else or to consult a book or a dictionary. Just consult the dictionary of your own experience. So I really love that. Just consult the dictionary of your own experience. It's sort of like it's all there. You just have to look more clearly and more deeply. And I guess that kind of warm, direct experience really has helped me to be able to do that. So the other area that I think's really, I found really helpful is the whole approach to thoughts, and looking in the same direct way at our mental activity. And this is certainly a big part of the courses that me and Naga Bodhi teach, that we really focus on this element of, firstly, that thoughts are not reality. And we really sort of encourage people to again, sort of look at what thoughts really are. So it's so much not about stopping thoughts. You know, you'd be better off kind of being able to stop breathing than you would to be able to stop thinking. It's just a constant flow. It's just, in a sense, the mind doing its job, of turning things over, of exploring things, of doing what it does. So it's not about kind of trying to stop that. It's trying to see thoughts for what they are. And one of the kind of elements of that I really love is that idea that whatever the content of thought, and we don't focus so much on content of thought, but whatever the content is, that you don't have to kind of change it or stop it or improve it. You just have to see it for what it is, and in a sense stop believing in it. Yeah, so the idea of kind of thoughts not being facts. I always remember that we brought in the kind of the sense of you don't have to believe what you think, and that people find that incredibly liberating, actually. Incredibly liberating, that idea that that we can really experience thoughts as quite sort of tyrannical and out of our control, and get a sense that you've got to kind of replace thoughts with better thoughts, or you've got to keep some thoughts out, or oh no, that kind of thinking is back again. And this is very much saying, well, you don't put all your energy into fighting with that. Actually, just try and see. It's just events in the mind. It's just habits of the mind. It's highly conditioned. And I think Naga Bodhi was talking about this today, that sort of sense of thoughts are completely sort of coloured and driven by our history. They're driven by our feelings. They're driven by what's happened today, what's happened right now, what our energy level's like. We sometimes talk about thoughts in the mindfulness world as the sort of the glasses through which we see the world, and that they'll be kind of different colors depending on what's going on. And one of the things Kulananda, who's another mindfulness teacher, said, which I really liked, was that that thoughts are like a liquid lens through which we see everything. So they're liquid because they're constantly kind of affected by whatever it is that's going on in our heart, body, mind, feelings. Yeah, so they affect this liquid lens, but it's how we see the world, but it's also how we see us, how we see our own experience. So so I think part of what I've found really helpful about that is this sort of debunking the authority of habitual thinking, that we give it so much power. We give our thinking, we give it that power, and that it's possible to take that power back by just watching our thoughts coming and go. Again, investigating them, the repetitiveness, we always think a thought is new and meaningful and what it's all about, but actually the chances are we've had that thought hundreds of times before, if not thousands of times, maybe in a different guise slightly, but it comes along again and we think, oh yes, this is what's happening. So sometimes even just recognizing that, oh, this is just an old thought playing itself out, this is just a mental habit, I don't need to be afraid of it, I don't need to believe it, and it certainly isn't what's going on probably. And the next kind of element of that is not only are thoughts not reality, but thoughts aren't us either. So a lot of the course is kind of about kind of defusing from thoughts, that we tend to be fused with our thinking. We think that's who we are and where we live, but of course thoughts are totally conditioned, changing, moving, saying one thing one moment, another the other moment. So kind of that's another kind of quite big thing for people, is that sort of realization that thoughts aren't us. And people sometimes say, well, of course it's me, of course it's me, I'm having a thought, and but we say, well, how do you know you're having a thought? Who's hearing that thought in you? Who's perceiving that thought? Well, actually, it's awareness, isn't it? There is something that's more than thought. Otherwise, you wouldn't know you were thinking. And what we, call this in mindfulness is metacognition. So it's an awareness, basically, that's bigger than thought. And we're very familiar with that in Buddhism, the idea of an awareness that's more than thinking, that's more than sensation, that's more than feeling. So we're not seeing the world through our thoughts so much. We're aware of having thoughts. They don't have us, as it were. So I found that incredibly helpful. And I know when I came to do what's called the Order Insight Inquiry course, which is an intensive sort of direct pointing course that some people do in the order with a mentor. That was where I had my sort of deepest experience, was really seeing through the fabrication of the nature of thinking far more deeply than I ever had before, which had a, you know, a real sort of opening effect on my mind. And, you know, it was very much based on that work, I think, that I'd done before with thoughts, and this ability to kind of come back to direct experience. And then last, I thought the other kind of sort of insightful area or insightful conditions are maybe not such an aha moment, but a more sort of deep recognition, I think. And that is, again, something that we've touched on before, around Vedana, around that we all share Vedanas, that we all want pleasant experiences, we don't want pain, and we can't utterly control life, and pain can't be avoided. And that all we can do is come into relationship with that differently, as it were, not resist, you know, allow in, look at experience differently, open to experience differently. But I think when we talk about this on the courses, often what you feel is that there's a real kind of heartfelt sort of recognition in people that they are not alone with this, that it's a step out of isolation and into connection with others. There's a real sort of realization that it's not just them individually, that they've got something wrong, which is, I often think, what people do think. They're just living life wrong. And if they could only quite get it right, get things in the right order, it would all be okay. But there's a realization that this is a shared human condition. And yeah, again, I'm just going to read something. Yeah. Yeah, just it's simple, but I like it. Mindfulness thus enables us to see and work with the universal vulnerabilities and challenges that are an inherent part of being human. And I think that sort of universality of the vulnerabilities and challenges of being human is something that starts to strike people. And I think that's very profound. It's maybe not as kind of exciting as when people realize that thoughts aren't facts, or that they're not their thoughts, which often does really open things up for people. But I think it's a deeper, kind of slower recognition of something that actually you know, takes longer to change. And that, in a way, is what I'm particularly interested in my practice at the moment. And I suppose I think of it as the turning of a great whale, you know, the idea of actually changing the heart, of really bringing the heart out of isolation and the heart out of selfing, and starting to realize that interconnection that's there. Yeah, the turning of a great whale, something slow but deeply powerful and important. And of course, in this area is where, you know, bring on the rest of Buddhism, basically, you know, bring on the archetypes and devotion and ritual and anything, in a way, to start to speak to that part of oneself, to start to go beyond our habitual kind of sense of being on a much deeper level. Yeah, so I think those are those to me are the three sort of conditions that I've found in this type of mindfulness that I found really, really useful. And there are more, and I'm sure I could, you know, talk more if I thought more about it, but I thought this was enough. But yeah, so interconnection, thoughts, and direct experience, which I think is the basis for just any kind of Buddhist practice that we do, and is going to make us more receptive to that accident of insight. We start to make ourselves open to it by practicing those things, and that's certainly my continued experience, is that those are the real bedrocks for me. So I'm just going to read one more thing, and then I shall end. And I quite like this. Just some of you might know it. It's by Kafka. You do not need to leave your room. Remain sitting at your table and listen. Do not even listen, simply wait. Be quite still and solitary. The world will freely offer itself to you to be unmasked. It has no choice. It will roll in ecstasy at your feet. So just that sense of, if we just pay attention to our authentic, real experience, and we take a more malleable mind and openness to it, going beyond our habitual thoughts and open our hearts, then the world will just reveal itself to us, as it were. So thank you, everybody. We're going to, we'll have a little kind of micro break, and then we'll just have a just sitting practice. So I'll lead us into that, but I won't say much. I'll give us kind of some quiet space to just be with our minds and our experience, and then we'll do a transference of merit. So just a couple of minutes break now.
You're muted, Vimla Chitta.
Thank you. Yeah, so if you just like those of us are here to find a position. That's going to be right for your body and awareness tonight. So just letting yourself settle. And like Naga Bodhi was saying today, you don't need to put on your special meditator's self. You can just be you, how you are right now. All you're doing is consulting the dictionary of your own experience. It's all there.
Chitta, sorry to interrupt, but there's something making a rattling noise. I think it might be the mic on your pullover.
Ah, okay. Oh, maybe it's my... Is that better?
Not really.
I'll tell you what.
It probably doesn't really matter. I just thought you take your headphones out and use it. Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. That might be better. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for telling me.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so just tuning in with yourself, how you are right now, your body. Seeing if you can let your awareness open up to wherever the body is, whatever sensations come to the fore. Noticing your mental activity, what's going on in your mind. Maybe not getting caught in the content of your mind, but the sort of activity of it, the busyness, the sleepiness, calmness. The atmosphere even of your thoughts. Do they have a feeling tone? and just how you feel at the moment. How it feels to be you tonight. And just having that overall sense of your experience and just sitting back. Into the sort of natural awareness that's there of your experience. And I'll just read a poem before we go into just sitting by John O'Donoghue. I would love to live like a river flows, carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. I would love to live like a river flows, carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. And then in your own time, we're going to just come out of the meditation and end with the transference of merit and self-surrender. May the merit gained in my acting thus go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings, my personality throughout my existences, my possessions, and my merit in all three ways. I give up without regard to myself, for the benefit of all beings. Just as the earth and other elements are serviceable in many ways to the infinite number of beings inhabiting limitless space, so may I become that which maintains all beings, situated throughout space, so long as all have not attained to peace. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, and thank you very much, Rita.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks. Good night.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Thanks.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
How do I? Oh, there we go. Bye bye, Maria. Bye.
Bye, Inga. Bye, Inga. We got some really.
Bye bye. Good night.